the screen, and Yulia Edmidal on the tuba sound, please.
Welcome, everyone. My name is Patty Zimmerman, and with Tom Chevery, my friend and colleague, we are the co-directors of the Finger Lakes Environmental Film Festival. At exactly this time last year, we shuttered the Embodied Festival and ran 3 online exhibitions. Welcome to the 24th edition of the Finger Lakes Environmental Film Festival. This year, as we all know, is a historic year. COVID, protests on racial injustices, Black Lives Matter, masks, vaccines, remote learning, the shuttering of movie theaters and opera houses and concert halls, the US Capitol insurrection, the Zoomiverse, and of course, most importantly, the yearning for connections around ideas and community. This year, for the first time in 24 years, we are 100% virtual. We have 2 FLEFF mottos this year: FLEFF, a different environment, and the other, we are the screen, both developed by our festival producers, Anne Michelle and Phil Wild. We are delighted and honored that all of you from everywhere can join us today for this very special album launch of Winding Pathways by our colleague, David Earle. And you've actually just heard David play because he is the composer and performer of the music you heard over our opening, and the music is entitled Infiltrations. During this event, please look at the chat for extended bios, links, and references. At the end of this talk back and session today, we ask all participants to unmute and put their cameras on to give a round of applause and a really loud bravo to David Earle and Diana Swoboda. There will be an after party in our Zoom lobby immediately following this session, so do hang on to continue our conversation, and in this case, our celebration of the album launch, Winding Pathways, in an informal setting. Our moderator for this exciting launch is Diana Swoboda, who joins us from Arizona today. Diana is a tubist, educator, and entrepreneur. She is associate professor of music at Arizona State University and a former member of Dallas Brass. Take it away, Diana, and welcome.
Thank you, Patty. And I just want to say a special thank you and shout out to all of the people on the FLEFF production team. This is just so exciting to be here with all of you today. And thank you to our viewers, colleagues, friends, and perhaps some brass players who may be joining us today. We look forward to our time together with you. And it is my great honor and pleasure to introduce to you our feature soloist today, Dr. David Earle, who is Assistant Professor of Tuba and Euphonium at Ithaca College. And David, take it away. David, amazing. It is so great to hear you play again. Just incredible. You know, for a moment there, I thought that my Zoom was speeding up, but it was actually you playing that fast. That is really incredible, beautiful playing. Will you tell us a bit about that piece,
Thanks
Hajazka
so
Longa?
much. Yeah, thanks so much, Deanna. This is a really interesting find for the tuba. I wanted to open with something that was a little untuba-like. This piece is called Kerdili Hachazakar Langa, and it was written by an Armenian composer by the name of Kamani Sebu. It was later adapted for the tuba by a really phenomenal tuba player named Gary Buttery, who's been really active in picking world musics and bringing it to the tuba. He's a former player of the U.S. Coast Guard Band, plays in the Alchemy Tuba Quartet, and a good friend of one of our participants here who I saw, Joanna Ross Hersey. This piece it's a blast. So Kerdili Haikazakar is essentially a term that you can translate to the key of the piece, if you're thinking in Western terms, but it's really titled the maqam of the piece, or the kind of tonal landscape in which the piece occurs. So the opening is an exploration of this idea of Kerdili Haikazakar. The term longa, the second half of the title, is the genre of piece that it is. So longa translates effectively to a party song. So this is a party song, in the key of Kurdili Hakazakar Langa.
That is cool. Well, you definitely brought the party to the room right off the bat. Thank you for that. Amazing.
What I always aim for.
Just incredible. Friends, we have an hour for you that we're going to share tuba, talk about David's first CD release, Winding Pathways, a little bit about tuba history, have some fun along the way, some time for you to ask questions. And we have a surprise guest with us today, as well as maybe a little bit of a surprise at the end too, for all of you to get involved. Yeah, David, just really, really, really beautiful. You know, right off the bat, our listeners who are not tuba players or who are not brass players or musicians might be asking, how do you make the sound on the tuba? Like, how do you actually produce the sound? You know, some people might wonder, you know, is it just that you're pushing the button and blowing? But how would you describe the sound that's made on the tuba, and how do you actually do it?
That's a great question, because brass instruments in particular have this invisible mystery, right? You put your mouth on the horn and no one sees what happens on the inside, and then these amazing sounds come out. And so brass instruments all function, the tuba all the way up through the piccolo trumpet, all function through the same idea. And it's through buzzing lips or vibrating lips together within a shape. And so this little thing in my hand, well, it's a pretty big thing, I guess, compared to some of the options out there, is a tuba mouthpiece. And so this little device, when I push air through my lips when they're touching, amplifies that sound and then creates another amplification on the horn. And so the whole mystery of playing a brass instrument is unraveled as soon as you isolate down to the vibration of these lips, this membrane and the air behind it. The
cool.
Interesting thing about tubas and instruments of their types is that the buttons, while they help, kind of only give us a limited amount of help. It's really the buzz that gives us all the center of the pitch across the board.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. You know, I actually brought with me today, you know, thinking about how we produce a sound on the instrument. I'm going to change my background a bit and give you a look at a real tuba office. This is so exciting. This is where tuba players live in Arizona. You know, part of it, really thinking about the tuba, it's the vibration of the lips that makes the sound. And you know, if you were to unwind your tuba, actually, how long would it be? How many feet?
Oh, the tuba that's next to me right now, before you press any buttons down, is 12 feet long. Once you add all the buttons down, you're almost up to 23 feet long. It's an immensely
That's incredible.
long tuba.
It is. Well, you know, I think a good demonstration is something like the normal everyday garden hose, where if you vibrate your lips into a piece of tubing, it actually produces a sound. Right, a little everyday bugle call, a little bit, and then, you know, as you notice, David's instrument, it has a bell. So David, you know, I think if we were to take and add a bell onto a hose-like instrument, you do get more of an amplified kind of a sound. It's kind of crazy, right?
Yeah, it gives it a different color altogether, that bell.
Yeah, it does. You know, so now the mystery is solved, and everyone now knows how a sound is produced on the tuba, which is pretty exciting. And so as you learn more about tuba along the way, perhaps if you're not currently a tuba player, it might be something that you'd like to pick up along the way. And, you know, I'm going to take us back here for just a moment to Arizona, to the waving palm trees. And so, you know, with that in mind, how did you get started playing the tuba, David? Was it like when you were in the 4th grade, you saw a tuba and you wanted to play the tuba, or did you actually start on another instrument, as often tuba players do?
I was very lucky. As you might have guessed, I was a pretty large child, and I was drawn to large things. And so in 4th grade, our band director came to visit the general music class and brought along this tuba, and I was just fixated by this enormous object. The immensity of it just like completely compelled me. And I was just, so I knew in that day, I was like, I'm going to play a big thing. So I was like, number 1, tuba, number 2, bari sax, number 3, just the bass drum, no other drums. Those were my options. And so my instructor, she was a trumpet player, and she's like, okay, this kid's probably big enough to probably hold the tuba. We'll give him a chance. And I was really fortunate that I had a very patient early music teacher. Her name is Lucy Farron, really great mentor to me. And I just fell in love with this thing, this big, ominous sort of instrument. And I was lucky in that both of my parents were teachers at my school. And so I had the option of like sitting on a bus and driving home for 45 minutes, or just sitting and waiting at school until they went home at the end of the day. And I could choose to sit in the library quietly and do nothing, or I could go to the band room and I could practice tuba for 45 minutes every day, which was way more fun to make naughty sounds than quietly sit in the library. And so I had an intensely patient band director who would often give me tips and pointers while I was just practicing and learning more about this instrument in the days after school. And that kind of love just developed into a real passion for learning more and more about the instrument.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, that's amazing. When did you purchase your first tuba? Like when does, you know what I mean? And are they expensive?
Oh, they are indeed expensive. I got my very first, I was lucky. My first one I got in 8th grade. We got it for $500 US, which is so few dollars for a tuba. It was used, it was a Yamaha. And that was like the first investment when I was at the end of middle school, where I got my first horn. And it was a big commitment. I really was focused on practicing. Eventually, I got another horn, I think at the end of my freshman year of high school. It was an upgrade. And so generally, though, yeah, so to answer the second half of that question, man, our tuba is indeed expensive. They're not as expensive as some instruments. We're not talking about Stradivariuses or bassoons. But for the most part, if you're looking at like an intermediate tuba model, you can expect to drop between $4,000 and $10,000. And for a professional tuba, the low end ones are maybe $9,000 and easily go up into the 30,000s.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's why tuba players don't have cars until like they're out of college.
We're not sports car drivers for traditional.
That's right.
Anyway.
Oh, that's awesome. Amazing. Okay. This is a moment for our viewers. This is a chat moment. Thinking what you know about the tuba. If you would type into the chat, thinking about what you thought you knew about the tuba and what you've heard, type into the chat every cliche that you've ever heard about the tuba, or what you thought the tuba was before this film started. And anything that comes to mind. We just want to get a little marching bands. Yeah, slow. Thank you.
Yeah.
Can't make delicate sounds. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Hippos. Awesome. Yeah. Polka music. Absolutely. John Philip Sousa. Yep. Yep. I didn't know it could sound so pretty. Yeah. Grace. Thank you. Yeah. David has such a beautiful sound and is such a wonderful musician. Being able, that's really something that tuba players in particular spend a lot of time in our younger years, learning how to play a melody and play a beautiful phrase. Bulky spit valves. That's fantastic.
Yeah.
Cartoon soundtrack, right? Wasn't it SpongeBob SquarePants that had the tuba soundtrack? Or no, Veggie Tales. No, it was Veggie Tales. Yeah, fantastic.
Classic.
Yeah.
There was a great feature on Family Guy that I think one of my friends posted about following other people around. Oh, it's a shame.
It's so fantastic. Likes to drink beer. Norbert, you're absolutely spot on. That's fantastic.
Norbert coming all the way in from Germany.
Yeah, that's
great.
That is funny. Great. Good. Following chubby people first there'd be. It's fantastic. Opening riff of Schitt's Creek. Are you kidding me?
Yeah.
Is it really?
It's a synth tuba. I wish they would have hired somebody in. It's a real shame.
Oh man. Well, maybe if they hear your opening lick to the FLEFF festival, I'm just saying it could be redone. Thanks, everybody. That's amazing. Thank you so much. That brings a smile.
Yeah. One of our dreams as tuba players is to slowly both embody and dissolve some of the stereotypes that float around our instrument. I think that we live in a camp where like the humor of our instrument is a great tool for bringing people in, but then we got to get them hooked afterwards with some serious tuba stuff.
That's right. That's right. Well, speaking of some serious tuba stuff, let's dig into a little bit of tuba history. Because I think there's some pretty cool stuff that has taken place throughout history leading up to the tuba, because the tuba is actually one of the younger instruments, right? And
Yeah.
even I was actually thinking that as a like in the early days, we had signaling types of instruments. Could have been used possibly by like by Nordic Vikings, something like the bullhorn, which this is an actual bullhorn that's been hollowed out. It has a mouthpiece and of course the tubing, and that would be the bell, but a signaling type of instrument. I might give a very quiet demo. This is a very loud instrument, so I'm going to turn down my volume here and just give you a sample here. In all its toneful glory. And another signaling type of instrument, before we start talking about, actual brass instruments, this is a conch shell, and it's an actual, conch that an animal lived in, and it's been, of course, hollowed out, and this is the mouthpiece. The tubing is wrapped inside, and this would be used as a signaling type of instrument. Kind of similar to French horns. Now, French horn players put their hands in the bell. Early on, before the valve was invented, which David is going to talk about, I think, they had to use their hand to change the pitches, the notes. So this is similar in that way, but I'll give you a tone sample. So, derivatives of brass instruments used as signaling instruments before they were adapted for music. And it's really fun to see the history. David, would you like to go ahead and share your screen?
Absolutely. Yeah, I think that those are great representations of what led to modern brass instruments as we know them today. And I'm going to quick switch over here. And so we're just going to talk about the things that led to the modern tuba. So as Deanna mentioned, the tuba is really one of the very youngest of the modern instruments that are in the orchestra. It's only a little bit older by a year or two than the saxophone, which I think surprises a lot of people. I want to talk about the things that led to this instrument just for a brief period before we get back into modern tuba stuff. So the earliest version of a tuba-like instrument is an instrument called the serpent. It was a member of the cornetto family, which were all instruments made from a tube of wood wrapped with leather that had small holes in it, very much like a clarinet or an oboe or a recorder. But instead of having a reed or a whistle on the end, they attached a cup-shaped mouthpiece that you buzzed into to create that vibrating lips sound that powers all the members of the brass family. The first version of this instrument, really, really fascinating shaped instrument, was patented in 1590 in France, and it really established a long tradition of French serpent makers and French performers of this sort of music. In its early days, it was really partnered with the church, and it was used to bolster human voices, especially low voices. After a number of years, it was eventually used in orchestras as well, trying to bolster the sound of the bassoons and the basses by composers like Mozart, and then later by Berlioz and Wagner. I want to play a short sample of a really beautiful player of the serpent, one of my friends from Paris, Patrick Wivard. He is a serpent specialist of all things, although this instrument is now extinct. I'm going to make sure that I'm sharing my sound as well. Give me one brief second. There. If you can't hear this, let me know. So that instrument has a quality quite different than the tuba, right? It's much more soft and subtle. It's somewhere between a tuba and a bassoon and a human voice by a lot of people's comparison. There are also some raucous recordings of this instrument that you can find online that emulate, sorry, forgive me, emulate this kind of devilish sound. The next chapter in the development was the first true brass instrument. They were called keyed bugles, and their bass voice member was called the ophicleide. The ophicleide was essentially a long kind of bassoon-shaped tube covered with metal keys, borrowing from that same technique that clarinetists, saxophone players, and bassoonists use to cover and open a number of their chromatic holes across the whole instrument. A number of composers really adored this instrument because of its ability to bolster the sound of low instruments in an orchestra, in particular to make like really loud low sounds come out. And so this instrument was made probably most popular by Mendelssohn, Berlioz, and Wagner. We're going to play an example, perhaps the most famous example of ophicleide writing, which is from Berlioz' Symphonie Fantastique in the movement that features an old French plain chant called Dies Irae. And you'll hear in this recording both ophicleides and serpents getting that kind of edgy sound.
That is so
Here.
ominous. It's amazing. Yeah. You know, it wasn't it, David, in the day when, say, Berlioz wrote for one serpent and one ophicleide, that was to give more of the demonic sound, because when those two instruments were played together, it wasn't necessarily in tune or in tone with each other, right?
Yeah.
Is that right?
The players in
Yeah.
this excerpt are phenomenal players of these instruments, and they played adapted modern versions of ophicleide and serpent. At the time, they would have been at odds with one another, to say the least. Intonation was very difficult on these instruments, and so that raucous, edgy sound was really desirable. It helped augment the kind of demonic nature of a lot of those low, edgy sounds. The next big chapter that I think is worth talking about that changed the game for brass instruments, aside from trombone, who had already figured out the trick of to play chromatically, was the invention of the valve. I chose two pictures here. This is kind of the classic photo of what brass valves or buttons look like. And I chose another one that I think is really important to take a look at. So this middle tube that runs through, that's the normal brass instrument. That's like the 12-foot long part of my tuba before you press the buttons. This one little button, though, when depressed, activates and adds in this extra loop of tubing, which makes the tuba or whatever it's attached to longer. And that's the trick. That's the thing that brass instruments needed to be able to play more than just a diatonic series of pitches, or to play in the harmonic series, or to play horn calls. This addition of these buttons allowed for the total length of the instrument to change and grant people access to a whole new set of chromatic tones. Even though the technology's changed a lot over the years, the same idea holds true. I think you have a bugle on you right now, don't you?
Yeah, I did. I brought my bugle today. And this is an example of a bugle that was used in the military or in the cavalry. And typically the bugler would ride on the horse, and this actually still has the chain attached to it. So they would wear this on their belt and bring the horn up to bugle or signal, again, it being a signaling instrument and playing bugle calls. But again, that's all played with the lips. There are no valves, and that's, part of the technique of a brass player. Yeah.
Yeah. Let's go on to the next slide if I can find my mouse. There we go. So the very first tuba was patented in 1835, and I like to think that it changed the world. So this first instrument was patented, and it resembles in a lot of ways the ophicleide. It's tall and narrow, kind of like a bassoon. But the patenter of the first valve added it to this ophicleide shape and created what was called the first Viprit tuba. Wilhelm Viprit and Johann Moritz, who were both Prussian workers of instruments or German workers of instruments, made the tuba, and it evolved really rapidly. Within about 15 to 20 years, the tuba was in every orchestra throughout Germany and began to spread like wildfire into the rest of Europe. By the end of the 1800s, it was a member of every professional symphony. It was adopted faster than any other instrument in history, which we like to take as a moment of pride as tuba players. Beyond that initial invention of the instrument, there was a lot of steps that went into place to allow this instrument to modernize. You can see a picture of a more typical looking tuba, a kind of early contrabass German tuba in B flat that would have been more common to see by around the 1850s, 1860s. Wagner was really instrumental, no pun intended, in incorporating the tuba into his work, into his, especially his operatic works, but also his symphonic works, and allowing for the tuba to become of
Yeah, her phone on the pipeline is one of the.
so we have a little, there we go. The bass number of the horn ensemble. Bruckner and Strauss also followed in really quickly and began writing for the tuba as an extension of the trombone section. Outside of Germany and outside of Austria, and kind of the center of orchestral activity at that time, British brass bands began to really come to the fore. Instrument ensembles made exclusively of brass instruments, which are still immensely popular in England. And they not only capitalized on the use of the tuba, but also the euphonium or the tenor tuba, the small tuba's cousin.
And that was also, you know, the time I think when families of instruments were starting, right? Because we had this whole, you know, from a soprano instrument, the real high pitched voice and small, very small trumpet-like instrument to down to the tuba, the bass voice, the contrabass voice, and it still exists today as well in the brass band.
It's really evolved to a highly refined machine now, especially in brass bands. The idea of cornets, which are really just the soprano tubas, all the way down to tuba at the bottom of the ensemble. A number of modernizations happened, but the biggest thing you'll notice compared to that first tuba is that tubas got much wider and bigger. They were designed to make that big, deep, resonant sound and to accommodate all the extra tubing that was being added to this instrument. You can see the modern playing position here demonstrated by this section. You can see a great photo of kind of a standard tuba design here on the right. There are also a number of tuba-like instruments that are worth bringing a little bit of attention to. Perhaps the most famous is the sousaphone, which was commissioned by John Philip Sousa. It was actually first invented and built by J.W. Pepper, who was an instrument manufacturer in the area around Indiana. And that led to the availability of tubas in the outdoors, out in the wild, supporting the back row of a marching band and bringing concert music to the wide outdoors in general. One of their relatives that is a little less popular in the US, but still used quite actively in Russia and in parts of Eastern Europe, is called the helicon, which is essentially a concert tuba that's been wrapped like a circle. Its bell faces forward instead of up. Now I'd like to close this little section with just a couple notable early tuba players. We'll talk later about the idea of pedagogical lineage, but I think it's always important to show where we came from. One of our earliest tuba players who has a lineage living on in mouthpiece design in particular is the tuba player named August Helleberg. He was a Danish American who played with some of the top bands of his day. Played with the John Philip Sousa Band, one of the world's most premier military bands of the time. He also played with the New York Philharmonic, and he was the very first tuba player to win a job with the Chicago Symphony, which has become one of the most famous symphonies in the US for brass playing. Beyond developing tubas with C.G. Kahn, he also essentially designed what has become one of the most ubiquitous tuba mouthpieces in the biz, the Kahn Helleberg. Another great virtuoso of the tuba, perhaps the first virtuoso, is a tubist named Bill Bell, or William Bell, more formally known. He was also a member of Sousa's band a few years after August Helleberg. He played in the Cincinnati Symphony and became a figurehead in the tuba pedagogy of the world. He became the first professor of tuba at a number of institutions, including Indiana. He was also the very first tubist to record a solo album. And then we have a new international festivity called Tuba Christmas, which has been dedicated to his memory. I have a little audio clip of him from the very first album ever recorded for tuba, Bill Bell and his tuba.
Such a sweet sound. Isn't that just beautiful? You know,
He's a-
and that's vinyl. That's on vinyl, you know, too.
yeah, from back in the day.
Really cool.
Bill Bell,
Yeah.
a close connection of mine. He grew up in Iowa, just like me, which is very exciting as a modern tuba living out in the world. Now, after these influential tubists, August Hilleberg, Bill Bell, and more, Harvey Phillips, all these numerous tuba players who became active in the scene began promoting the tuba as a solo instrument, not just a member of ensembles. We saw eventually the push, the drive to our very first tuba concerto, a piece in which the tuba sits in front of the orchestra, gasp, surprise, and shock, and gets to play as a featured instrument. So in 1954, which is too long, I'll say it, almost over 100 years later, we get our very first concerto written by Ralph Vaughan Williams, who was a really devoted English composer, who wrote this piece in his late career when he was considered to be writing other oddball concerti, including a harmonica concerto and a xylophone concerto, but the tuba was in there. And it was the first piece to showcase the tuba as the figurehead of an ensemble. And it was the beginning of a huge tumbling towards lots of new rep for our instrument. The last tuba player I want to speak about before we go on to the next chunk of this presentation is Mr. Tuba, or Harvey Phillips, who really took on the mantle after Bill Bell passed away and became an absolute pusher of the tuba. He began to contact composers. His life goal was to make sure that every composer wrote at least one notable work for the tuba before their time composing finished, which is a great goal. It hadn't happened up until his lifetime in any way. Beyond this immense work commissioning new works, performing solo literature, and teaching, he was dedicated to forming community around the tuba, because tuba players are community people. We're bound to each other because
Yes,
of
we are.
our love of this instrument. And in 1973, he, amongst a number of other members of the tuba euphonium community, established TUBA, the Tubists Universal Brotherhood Association, which is a really uncomfortable title that eventually evolved into ITEA, the International Tuba Euphonium Association, which really bound together a lot of us to keep essentially a brain melt, a brain tank of all these ideas and concepts and growth for our instrument. He also founded Tuba Christmas in honor of his mentor, Bill Bell, and founded Octuba Fest, which is a great way to celebrate with tubas during the month of October.
Yes. Awesome. You know, actually, for those listening, if you have not yet attended your first Tuba Christmas, look up Tuba Christmas and attend one near you this year. There's one, at least one in every state, if not 2 or 3 or 4. And it's a big event. It's kind of a spectacle, actually, because hundreds of tuba and euphonium players show up to participate in the event. It's very cool.
Yeah, and the sound of multiple tubas and youths together, it's special. It's a haunting, gets in your bones sort of feeling.
Yeah. You know, Dave, thank you for that. It's nice to see the evolution of the instrument and hear some sounds of the instrument along the way as well. And I appreciate that you're talking about the community of tuba and euphonium players. And you know, in addition to ITEA, the International Tuba Euphonium Association, the International Women's Brass Conference was formed. And we have a special guest with us today, our good friend and colleague, Joanna Hersey, Dr. Joanna Ross Hersey. And she is currently the president of IWBC. Hi, Joanna. It's so nice to see you. Joanna when you said community, I thought about Joanna immediately, because she is someone who is not only an amazing tuba player and musician, she is president of IWBC. She gathers people together. She's a composer. She's a pedagogue. And I just admire her work so much. And it's a pleasure to have you here with us today, Joanna. Thank you. We can't hear you yet. I'm not sure why. No, it's one of those. I wonder if you unplug your microphone for a moment and replug in. Sometimes it's a Zoom thing. As tuba players, this is what we do on a daily basis.
Replugging in microphones.
Right.
So while Joanna goes through a couple of replugs, we're excited to share one of her really vibrant new works. So we talked about old music and new music, and old instruments and new instruments. And part of being a tuba player is merging all those worlds together. Oh, maybe we'll give Joanna a chance to jump in.
Testing 1, 2. Testing
Yay.
1.
There we are.
Yes. Wonderful.
Excellent. Yes, Dave, keep going though.
Of course, yes, the wonderful work. So one of the really inspirational musicians in early history is a woman named Hildegard von Bingen, who was a really dedicated Catholic mystic who was a member of essentially an extensive part of very well-studied nuns, who not only was a scholar in the field of biology and a really well-written philosopher, she also was a dedicated composer who held the ear of the Pope. And in part of her work contributing to the overall shape of the early church in essentially the Dark Ages, she brought forward some really beautiful, what we would call plain chants. And so I wanted to showcase Joanna's work. She's adapted a really phenomenal piece of Hildegard von Bingen's work for tuba. And we're going to showcase together in a dialogue the different sounds that tubas can make through Zoom. Would you like to speak a little bit about the piece, Joanna?
Yes, thank you. So Hildegard von Bingen was a mover and a shaker for sure. And about 1176, she bundled up 173 pages of music that she had written, and she sent it off to a monastery in Belgium, sort of marketing, right? And so one of the things that was in there is what Dave and I are going to play for you now. It's a small, we might call it an antiphon, a small hymn that was written for music, sort of incidental music within the church service. So she was at a monastery where there was a convent section in Germany at the top of a mountain in the forest, well, a hill in the forest, and her nuns and she would have done their own music for their services. And this was one of the pieces that she wrote and then shared. And the reason that we have it today is because of that monastery in Belgium. It's still in Belgium, the original. And so the text, I think, is neat because we chose it partly because of the time of year that we're in. So the piece is called "O Greening Branch," and it's sometimes translated as "blooming branch." And the text is technically speaking to the branch. It says, "Oh, branch, you look so beautiful in the dawn's light, and you cause us to lay aside our sins and be felt anew and fresh." It's got a wonderful line in it. It says, "Stretch forth your hand to lift us up." So we think that this might be, of course, more than just a branch. It's God or the Virgin Mary. Perhaps Hildegard wrote a lot of songs in honor of the Virgin Mary. So stretch forth your hand and lift us up. And also the idea that this springtime and the greening of the branches is a time for renewal, and that we all have that second chance. In her case, she would have wanted us to think about coming before God and laying aside all those bad habits and coming fresh again. So stretch forth your hand. So Dave and I are going to do this, and I want you to imagine that you're in that big stone church at the top of the forested hill at Disibodenberg in the year 1100 in Germany, as we play this as a bit of a call and response. I'm going to play one tuba note to test the other mic.
Beautiful.
Excellent.
that warms my heart. Oh, so beautiful. Both of you, such beautiful playing. And Joanna, thank you for bringing that
Thank
piece
you.
to the
It's
tuba
wonderful.
world. It's really incredible. You know, uh, your work with the International Women's Brass Conference. Will you say just a couple of words about that for us, just to share it? We're thinking about community and tuba.
Yes,
And
it's no
yeah.
surprise that it's already come up, even though we're not yet an hour into the conversation, this sense of how much we feel like a team because we're all misunderstood in the same way together. And so those things that we wrote in the chat, yeah. So
Yeah.
brass players, especially before the internet, it was a little more sparse. And so there was a wonderful symphony player in the St. Louis Symphony playing principal trumpet, Susan Slaughter. And she wanted to gather people together. And she knew from her experience as a female leading in one of these high level jobs that there aren't as many opportunities sometimes. And so she wanted to gather together and help mentor in the time pre-internet. So she said, let's have a conference. Let's get everybody together. We'll start a newsletter so we can share our activities. And the International Women's Brass Conference was born. There's a newsletter twice a year. So people share their achievements and you can come forth. And it was one of the first times I saw women playing brass instruments all in one
Likewise.
place. Yes.
Likewise.
So
it was empowering.
it
Yeah.
is empowering. And so we'd like to think that we might not need that kind of thing anymore. But the truth is that it is still a little uneven with regard to gender and some of those old stereotypes remain. And so this kind of thing that we're doing now, talking about it and putting it to rest is one of the missions of the IWBC.
Yeah, wonderful. Thank you. Thank you for your leadership.
Thank you.
And thank you for
Thanks,
being with
Joanna.
us today. It's so nice to see you. Thank you. Wonderful. You know, we'd like to open the room at this time for just a couple minutes for any questions, anything that you're thinking about, wondering about the tuba players. Does anybody have a question that you're wondering? Repertoire, life as a tuba player.
Mm-hmm.
And if you don't, that's okay. We're going to have some time at the end too, but we wanted to open up the room at this point and just check in with our friends who are viewing.
I have a question.
Yeah, please.
So for those of you who played, you all played tuba, but what size tuba do you play, and how did you come to choose
Sure.
that size tuba?
Sure. David, then Joanna.
Absolutely. Could you tell me your name? I recognize the voice, but I'm having a hard time finding you in the chat.
Sorry, it's Andrew Herrick.
Andrew, great, thanks. So there are a number of tuba sizes, which is a thing that not a lot of external players are aware of. So I'm a big person, and so I gravitate towards bigger sized tubas because they fit my body a little bit better. So they're measured in increments of quarters. So there are 3/4 tubas, 4/4 tubas, 5/4, and 6/4 tubas. And so both of my tubas, my C tuba, the big contrabass tuba, is a 5/4 or a 6/4. It's kind of on the line. And my F tuba is a 6/4 as well.
Cool. Joanna, how about for you? What do you play?
Like Dave, we have multiples, right? We tend to often play multiples. And so this one that you saw me playing just now is a large C tuba, a Rudy Meinl C tuba. So that is, you could hear even over Zoom, it's a larger resonant horn. That wouldn't be the best one to haul across an international airport. So sometimes we like to play smaller ones. And so I have a Yamaha F tuba, smaller as well, to get a little bit more clarity sometimes for higher things. But especially starting out, play what you have. I played a 3-valve King B flat all the way through until my senior year of high school. So It doesn't matter so much what you have, it's what you do with it.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I played a Conn 3-valve instrument for a long time, and I currently play a C tuba and an F tuba, and play Eastman like a 6/4 because I really wanted to, at this point in my life, have a big sound and have it be easy to produce. I love my C and my F. Andrew, are you a tuba player by chance? Or a euphonium player?
I'm a euphonium player.
Cool.
But I've been kind of getting into the tuba rabbit hole lately. So I've been watching a lot of YouTube videos.
Fantastic.
Looking at excerpts, and I have a tuba from my school that I'm borrowing right now. It's a Yamaha. It's a 4/4 or 4/4. Sorry, it's a rotary tuba. So I've been using that kind of to explore some of the repertoire, play some excerpts.
Good,
that kind of
good.
thing.
Be a
Yeah.
doubler, be a doubler, be a tripler. It's really great. You know, doubling, tripling on low brass means more opportunities to do things. So I encourage you to do that for sure. Good luck to you. That's wonderful. Yeah, terrific. Awesome. Another question?
This is Phil Wild. I've got a question. Joanna just made me think of this. How about traveling with that tuba? I mean, I think about cellists and they have a hard time, but you've got to have an impossible time. How do you manage that?
I try to strike a balance. I've got a really protective travel case. It's thick wall. It's got a lot of memory foam in it that kind of holds the horn in place. I've had minimal damage, and so I often will check my horn even for international flights. But it's because I have a case that I really trust. Recently, especially if it's on domestic flights and I have tight connections, I'll just buy a second seat for my horn and bring it in a softer sided case. But every once in a while, people get a little bit finicky about having a tuba on a plane. And so you have to make sure that you're always presenting your ticket immediately to everybody to prove, like, no, this tuba has a seat. Its name is tuba, musical instrument owned by David Earl. Yeah, its official name. It has a United mileage card and everything.
It's fantastic. Sure. Thanks, Phil. Other questions? Dave, I think we should come back to this is your CD release party, just
Yeah.
saying, which is
That's
so
true.
exciting. And we'd love to hear something from your CD.
Yeah.
What do you have that
So
you'd like to present?
I've got a really evocative work on the album. We worked for a while to find a way to play this live through Zoom, but we think the best way is to just share the audio directly with you. It's a very meditative piece. It's a piece called My Mountaintop, which was written by the composer Andy Scott. He's a saxophonist and originally adapted it for saxophone, but later it's been adapted for almost every instrument in the orchestra. This version for tuba I recorded for the album. It has a really evocative text by the BIPOC poet from England named Lem Sissay, who's had an amazing life. And this poem called My Mountaintop is just a discussion of the struggle to pursue art and to come through adversity with a really bold ending. So I think that I'd like to just present the whole piece through. It's a little bit long, but it's really meditative. I'm going to turn my video off and just share my sound. And I welcome you to just stay in a place of quiet and listen to this piece too. It's very meditative. I hope that you'll enjoy My Mountaintop by Andy Scott and Lem Sissay.
When I swam oil-filled waters, when I was thrown on this river earth, when I saw a mother's crying face dying, when I walked through icy fields, when I slept on beds of snow, when I felt the leaden hailstones, when I swam against the ice floe, I carried on for a reason. When thoughts were crucifixes, when nightmares grew from the ground, when screams were entwined in every word, every sound, every word, every sound, when wounds opened and cried salted tears, when every day passed away like it was a year, I carried on for a reason. And I would see angels playing Twister, and by the cool sky stream, I would see layers of my own tears drift past like floating packs of dreams, and I would see glistening hope in every single teardrop of pain, and I would hear the sound of music in all this falling rain. I carried on for a reason. That I would reach here one day. One day.
Beautiful playing, David. That piece, like, I have a box of Kleenex nearby. It's such a like meditative, emotional, and spiritual kind of a piece, especially knowing the poet and his story. And
Yeah.
you know, please check that out. for our listeners. It's just what a beautiful, beautiful piece. Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you for
it's a real
recording that.
inspiration.
Yeah. Wow. Amazing. Man, whew, I feel like I have to catch my breath. David, let's talk for a moment about your recording project. You know, David and I have a relationship of teacher, student, now friend, colleague, and um, David, you recorded this CD in Tempe, Arizona at Tempest Recording with Clark Rigsby and sound engineer, and Gail Novak, pianist, our wonderful collaborator friend. Um, and tell us about the pieces on your CD, and
Yeah, of course. So the album initially was kind of envisioned to be a job application CD that then evolved into a much bigger project, and thus the title Winding Pathway. It's a number of pieces that have very few ties together, other than that I love them. And so the first piece that I really loved that I showcased on the album is a piece by Johann Sebastian Bach. He never wrote for the tuba, unfortunately. He just passed away a couple of centuries too early to write for us. So we stole one of his flute pieces. Another piece that I featured is by the Polish composer Krzysztof Penderecki, who wrote a really influential work for tuba called Capriccio. He wrote it in the course of like 1.5 days, and it's become an absolute monument in our literature. Beyond those two kind of central works, I also recorded some of the works by our mentor, Sam Palafian, who's a really phenomenal tubist and composer. I was the first to record his Relentless Grooves Armenia on tuba, and I was really happy to share that with the world. I wanted to share too this piece you just heard, Andy Scott's My Mountaintop, in that it's a really evocative work. The first time I heard it, I was just hooked, and it's been a piece that I've really kept in my pocket ever since because of how much I think it impacts audiences and how much the tuba and the voice together sound so natural.
Yeah, it's amazing.
Yeah, and then I concluded with one of kind of the old gems in the tuba literature called Romanian Dances. There was a really phenomenal tubist by the name of Ionel Dumitru who wrote a series of works based on the folk music of his country. And so I recorded the second of that suite as the closer for the album. One of my favorites from this collection of 6 dances from his from his origin country.
Wonderful. Yeah, yeah. Just such a nice, sort of eclectic group of pieces. And actually, you know, as you mentioned, you know, our mentor, you recorded a piece by Sam and also by Jim DeMars. Both are Arizona composers. And I think you had something you'd like to share with us in regard to, you know, maybe share a little bit of that piece. And, you know, what's so interesting about this piece is that it's for pre-recorded fixed accompaniment, and it's just really interesting sounding, completely different than My Mountaintop.
Absolutely, yeah. And so another piece that I forgot to mention that you brought up is this great piece called Tapestry 3 by James DeMars, who was my composition teacher at Arizona State, and whose piece really moved me. It was written originally for the tubist Dan Perantoni, and it's part of kind of a chapter in the world of tuba youth literature that kind of evolved into a focus on music for tuba with pre-recorded electronics. And so this work, I'm going to show you a sample of the score, since this is something that tuba players are getting more and more used to seeing in the world abroad, although it's not so familiar to all musicians. So let me get my computer set up to quickly share this. I'm going to share both my screen and my sound. Oh, maybe I won't.
Jim DeMars also wrote a piece for tuba euphonium quartet. This has been within the past few years. We commissioned him to write a piece for a student quartet that performed that piece at the Army Band Tuba Euphonium Conference. It was really a lot of fun. Neat piece.
Thanks, Deanna. So this slide shows the opening of Tapestry 3, which is the third piece in a series that Jim had written for a number of different instruments. And it has this first line you can see demonstrates the synthesizer cues that are the cue that the performer is listening into as they prepare. The second line breaks into 2 scores. The bottom score is the synth track, and the upper score is the solo tuba track. And so I'm going to follow along with my mouse as we go, but you'll see there's a number of musical shorthand devices used here. In the opening, you'll see this repetition sign. That means that the motive is repeating over these bars. Same thing here. You'll also hear that not all the sounds in the track are represented on this synth track to help prevent the player from being a little overwhelmed by all that data. Here's a snippet from the album, Tapestry 3. Sorry, I've lost my mouse. And this sort of notation is kind of what we've gotten used to in the world of tuba youth when we work with pre-recorded instruments or pre-recorded sounds to help kind of keep us in line with the track as we go through.
It's cool. Sometimes you can't tell the difference between the sound and the tuba, right? It's really neat. You did such an amazing job of really blending your sound with the sounds that Jim had produced. You know, it's fun talking about mentors. I want to share my screen for just a moment, and that David and I share musical mentors. And this is our mentor, Sam Palafian, on the left there. And on the far right, there's David as a student. So fun with Sam.
Back in my pre-beard days.
I know, right? Oh, this is so cool. And there's my short hair days. That's me in the middle with Sam Palafian in the middle, and on the left, that's a tuba maker, one of our famous tuba makers, Gerhard Meinl. And you know, that's just, I mean, our mentors become, I mean, we're mentors for life, but we also become friends and colleagues, and it's a really special relationship. And it's really fun to share a mentor with each other too. So, you know, and Sam Palafian was the first, he was the tuba player who premiered Leonard Bernstein's Mass at the opening of the John F. Kennedy Center for the Performing Arts. Really amazing. And he also played with Pink Floyd. He was a founding member of the Empire Brass Quintet. And he was also, you know, a very flexible musician, a jazz performer as well. He formed the Travelin' Light duo with guitarist Frank Vignola in 1991. And, you know, yeah, just as a mentor teacher, how you see your mentor and teacher doing things, and we aspire to be like that person and do those kinds of things. And I think a big takeaway for me, I'm not, you know, maybe similar for you, Dave, is the flexibility and, you know, I think personability and the community building, you know.
Yeah, the thing that always amazed me so much about Sam was his ability to be a musical chameleon. He could literally blend in anywhere. That was his real skill. That is earth-shatteringly amazing. His ability to hide in any ensemble and feel like he was always supposed to be there.
Yeah, really incredible. You know, speaking about Sam, do you mind playing another short piece for us?
Sure. Yeah, there's a great selection from this album that is from his kind of an homage to his roots. He was an Armenian American tuba player, and he wrote a piece called "Relentless Grooves Armenia," which is featured on this album as well. The third movement is called "Lament," which I think is actually really appropriate for where we're at. This piece is played with a drone, and so I'm gonna ask a favor of the audience. I want you to stay muted, but I'd like for you to hum the drone while I play along with you. So this is going to be an interactive experience. And so let me share the sound of this drone that I'm going to be playing with you. Give me 1 second. Get my horn ready.
Get your instruments warmed up, everyone.
Yes, this is your opportunity.
Me.
And the pitch that you're going to be matching is this pitch right here. You can sing it in whatever octave you feel comfortable.
Good, and then we'll mute ourselves and Ooh, sing along while you play. Okay, here we go.
Sorry.
How did you do, everyone? Beautiful playing, David, and singers. Lovely, lovely. Great. Really
all
just
of you, all across the globe.
beautiful. Great. You know, I know our time is sort of nearing an end, and we could go on and on about tuba because that's what we love, right? It's our passion. It's what we do. You know, for the sake of our time together today, and to maybe save some time for questions as well, David, you know, well, okay, briefly, you know, I wanted to ask you about you talked so well about the tuba history, your research project. You know, just briefly, talk with us about your research. And David received the highest award for his research in tuba from the International Tubaephonium Association, and it was really great research. Share a little bit about that
Thanks.
with us.
Yeah,
briefly.
so outside of being a player, part of being a professor is also doing some scholarly work. And so I wanted to uncover the mysteries of the tuba. There aren't a lot of mysteries. When you get a good mystery, you just got to grab it by the reins and run after it. And so what I wanted to uncover in my research was a very strange tuba design that the C.G. Kahn company made in the US in the kind of turn of the century, from the 1800s into the 1900s. They had a very atypical design. In fact, I'm going to grab a horn that's in my office here to show you that has this design. So this little tiny horn you're about to see, it's called an alto horn. It's the alto tuba. This instrument has this
Cute.
very odd
So
upward
small.
facing valves all the time. And so this design perplexed me as a child. Why would someone do this to themselves? It's way more expensive. It doesn't make any sense to the player, and it's not very ergonomic. And so I partnered with the National Music Museum, which is this amazing resource in South Dakota where I did my undergrad, that has a collection of over 18,000 instruments. And part of that collection includes a collection of, I'm not joking, 14 E-flat tubas that are the exact model of this weird design. 14 of them. That's so many tubas that are the exact same tuba.
Yes, it
And
is.
so this museum gave me the opportunity to have a lot of on-site research. And so I compared and contrasted this design with what's called the front action version of the same design. So you can have tubas that have valves in the top or tubas that have valves in the front. And so my theory was that the valves on the front, the top action horns, were the exact same thing as the valves on the front action ones. They just were using the same parts to save money. And
The
so
mystery,
I
mystery,
know. And
right?
so the hurdle was that the company had lost all of their records in a fire, multiple fires. And it wasn't because someone was an arsonist. It was because they had open flames in their factory for the better part of all year round. And so after spending about 3 months measuring, comparing, and drawing these contrasts between horns, we figured out that that's probably what they were doing, which is not the most exciting punchline to the research, but like 86 to 94% sure this is what they were doing. An Eli Whitney experience in the tuba factory.
It's amazing. It's so cool. And your dissertation was like 200 pages long. Just saying, if you're
too long.
interested in that reading, please look up David Earl and tuba. You will find it. Dissertation. It's amazing. You know, David, thank you. You're such an incredible musician, a pedagogue, a scholar, a wonderful teacher, and most importantly, a great friend. And you know, our listeners might be thinking, you know, what could possibly make our time together more thrilling? Well, if all of you would please go to your gallery view, please click on gallery view. And
all of you, those of you who are in on the surprise, this is your cue.
This is
Quickly
your
grab
cue.
Stuff. We changed the plan just briefly.
Oh, this is fantastic, because
happening.
just when you thought there was nothing that could make this more thrilling, you were wrong. A tuba flash mob. Are you ready? Bam, here we go. Amazing. It's like music to my ears. You're all so amazing. Oh, look at, oh, it's just amazing. All of our I see so many tuba euphonium friends out there. Thank you. Awesome. So wonderful. That was our moment. It was a moment, and that moment can never be repeated. I'm just saying.
Absolutely.
Awesome. David, thank you. And congratulations on your new CD, Winding Pathways. It can be found just about anywhere. If you Google those words and David Earl, you will find it. Please buy your copy today. And we're going to end our time together there and open up for questions.
Yeah, and thank you so much for all of you for being here, and thanks to the FLEFF team for inviting us in to do this amazing, strange, and cool tuba experience. We're pretty glad that it happened. I hope you are too.
Thank you, Joanna, as well.
Yeah, thank you, Joanna. Thank
Terrific.
you, Patty. Thank you to Phil and Annie Michelle. And thank you, who am I forgetting? Grace has been helping out in the background. We got all sorts of people. Anyway, we should open the floor for questions. This is your chance. What burning tuba questions do you have?
Hi, I have one question for you guys. First of all, congratulations on your CD. So my question is, in my path the last couple of years, it's kind of taken me away from music, and now I'm finally getting back. And so I'm looking into getting lessons again. I'm curious what you and Dr. Svoboda and Dr. Hersey, maybe if she would like to chime in, what has your experience been with Zoom lessons? Like, what challenges are there, and how have you kind of adapted to these interesting times that we live in?
Ben, it's so nice to see you. I just have to say that it's so great to have you in the room with us. Thanks for being here.
For those of you who weren't aware,
thank
Ben
you. It's
is
great
a
to be
fellow
here.
Sun Devil. We went to school at the same time at ASU.
So great. David, go ahead.
So the biggest hurdle, at least from a tuba perspective or a euphonium perspective, when it comes to Zoom stuff, is the microphone input. You got to have at least a USB mic, preferably like an audio interface and a heavy hitter mic to help out. If you're using like a laptop mic or even like a built-in mic on an iPad or a tablet, the compression is monstrous. Even with really good setups with an external mic, the compression can still be monstrous. And so getting that kind of initial investment on both sides, whether you're teaching or taking lessons, having a USB mic and a good interface, and often like a Bluetooth headphone setup is a game changer, I think. But the availability is amazing. I can have lessons with people all over the world tomorrow. It's that part's worth the weird cost of the experience. I don't know if Joanna or Deanna, you have things you want to add to the Zoom?
Yeah, Joanna, what's been your experience?
Yeah, thanks. That's such a great question, and I feel like we're all struggling a lot with how we how we approach this all. But I think I'd like to say that, like many of you, we've been in this world now for more than a year, and I'm so inspired by everybody just sticking with it through all the hardships. And so those of you that might be with Zoom lessons, some of us are teaching face-to-face, or some of us are in a mix. My university is kind of half and half right now. And thank you all for being so flexible and patient as we switch through it. I think it's definitely better than us, not having any interaction. And I think we're all looking forward to when we can get back to normal. But I just want to tell you that the positive energy that we see when we do these kind of virtual events and when we shift gears, like with this, it's just so wonderful. And so let's shout out to each other for that wonderful energy.
Hear, hear. Yes. Thank you, Joanna. Thanks. Terrific. Thanks, Ben, for that question. Another question.
I saw Emmy wrote in the chat, recommend repertoire for intermediate tuba students. Ooh, there's lots of great selections that have kind of become staples in the literature. I'm a big fan of the music of J.E. Barrett for intermediate students, an old Frenchish composer who wrote a lot of stuff for tuba piano. There's a great piece that if you want to have a student who's working on their high register called Richard Carr, which is a Gabrielli piece that would be great to tackle that. And I mean, gosh, if we're looking at etude books, I always push kids towards the Vladislav Blazovic etudes, which is a great collection of Russian etudes for the tuba and euphonium. Getting them into either the Fink studies in legato or maybe even eventually into the Bordoni studies in legato is a great thing to push them in their moving forward. Gosh, there's a lot of options out there. Every player is kind of a unique setup. What do you think, Deanna?
Recently I discovered Joanna's list of composers, and we're just looking for diverse composers, women and BIPOC composers that we haven't given attention to over the years. And it's awesome to discover all of these new works. Joanna, do you have something as a recommendation?
Let's do two. William Grant Still wrote a piece for saxophone. He's an African-American composer, and that is in a trombone edition by Doug Yo, which is great on euphonium or tuba. And then the music of Barbara York, which of course we all know and love. And that music is very accessible and beautiful, but difficult. So those would be the two things that I might throw out.
Wonderful. Wonderful. Thank you both. We have time for one more question before we have an after party coming up, and we want to invite you to that. One more question.
I got one if I could.
Yes, please.
So, hi, Dave, Deanna. Nice to see you guys.
Nice to see you.
And, boy, congratulations on this. I just love this album. I've listened to it over and over and over again. And you did such a great job with it. So my question is about this guy I got to learn more about named Clark Rigsby. Because so I first, I studied with Sam starting back in the late 1970s, actually, when he was in New York, and I was in high school, and I used to take the train in from Long Island to take lessons, so he was an important person to me, and it was so important to me. And when he passed, it was really tough. And so I remember tuning in to the memorial service. All right. And this guy, Clark Rigsby, is talking all about Sam. And I got a kick out of this guy. And then I go look at all my Sam CDs, and his name's on the back of almost every one of them. And I'm thinking, how great must it be to have had the opportunity to record with him? So tell us a little about this guy. Is he as wacky as he seems to be?
Yeah. I've actually got a great photo.
Is it to record with him?
Before I jump in, I also have to pitch. Michael Saltzman also just released an album during COVID.
Congratulations.
It's called Salt's Tuba. Excellent.
Congratulations. David, we just have a brief 30 seconds here.
Okay. If you see the bottom right, you got a picture of Clark. Clark Rigsby owns Tempest Recordings, and he is indeed as cool and out there a dude as everything makes you believe.
We will connect you. He is definitely someone to know, and he knows how to capture tuba sound. It's really awesome.
Yeah, he's
He and
world
Sam
class.
were great partners for over 20, 25 years. They worked together a lot. Yeah, yeah. Congratulations to you as well. That's so cool.
Yeah.
Thanks, and thanks for
It's
being
a
here today.
great album. It's a
Thank you
great
so much.
album, all on contrabass tuba.
Amazing. Oh, that's so cool. I look forward to hearing it.
Thanks.
Great. Got to get my copy. Terrific. Thank you, everyone. All good things must come to a point where we will get together next time. And with that in mind, I'd like to say again, congratulations to David Earl with Winding Pathways, your new CD. Everyone, please unmute yourself and for a round of applause and a bravo.
Bravo.
Bravo,
Bravo!
Diana!
Bravo!
Wonderful. And please join us for the after party. We will have about 15 minutes. We're going to hang around and just chat if you are available, interested. And yeah, so thanks everyone.
Thank you.
Really, really enjoyed our time together.
The best.